Hey, can you? I think we can hear you. Just a minute. Okay. So we're going to go over the quiz. For those of you that are not here today, I'll have your quiz papers for Monday so you can pick them up. But I do want to go through the 10 questions so you can go back to this video to review your questions. I'll try to get it put up as soon as possible. So we were talking about this coming Friday, right, a week from today for your first test. It's a little bit later than I had planned because it's taking a little bit longer to get to the material I had thought about. We're going to try to leave time for some review next week, so it really depends on how fast we get through this today. But we're going to go through the 10 multiple choice, sorry, not multiple choice, 10 quiz questions first, and then we'll kind of pick up where we left off and see how far we can get. Probably we'll finish up the material on Monday. Okay, so I don't think anybody missed question 1, and it is the nervous system is a fast-acting control system consisting of brain, spinal cord, nerves, and sensory receptors. That was pretty easy, right? I felt like it was because everybody got it. Why is water one of the requirements for human survival? This could be a number of different things. You could talk about it being making up 70% of the human body or the cell. Without it, we would dehydrate. One thing about this question is, if we can, we want to take it even deeper. Okay, and I know that this is 110. It's not the be all and all of biology courses. While I took most answers for this, I would love for y'all to take the critical thinking one step further. Okay, so when a question like this, why is water one of the requirements for human survival? The answers that I got were very fact-based. If we can, and on the test, I would like some thought put into it. Even if not necessarily it's fully correct, if I see you thinking through it, that's what I'm going for. Okay. Why do you think I want questions like this? Why do I want why questions that are short answer? Yeah. So I'm gonna take it a little bit further. Why would I want you to do that? Because I could just as easily ask a bunch of fill in the blank questions, right? Now those are easy. If you know the material, you can put it in. You don't actually have to understand it. So, but why do I want you to get to the point of understanding? You're not going to be biomakers. At least I don't think so. Maybe I'll change your mind. I doubt it. So why would I want you to be able to take it further and go deeper, more critical thinking? Okay, I love that answer. To make future connections, and those future connections are not going to stop at the end of this semester. I'm hoping that once y'all leave this class, you're going to take some of what you've learned and be able to apply it in some way to help yourselves or to help someone else, or just find that there's so much biology going on you can't avoid. And it's really easy to have, I'm going to call it like science blindness. Like you just don't realize that science is going on around you because science is just, it's constant. But people ignore it because we don't recognize it as easily. So I'm just trying to get y'all to go further. Critical thinking is useful in all fields. Okay, speech back people. Y'all are gonna have to think through all kinds of situations. Okay. You get a patient coming in, you've got to figure out what's going on with them. So y'all really have a lot to think about. But even if you're in, say, some kind of business, do you have to use critical thinking? Yeah. And one thing about that word critical thinking that's concerning to me is it's become this like really nice like blanket terminology that we say without thinking about. And I'm hoping to kind of avoid that. That's why I'm going to ask you why questions. I'll get back to this in a second. Okay. Some things can't be avoided that are absolutely like factual based. So we've got to know the anatomical positioning. So the heart is what to the arm? It's medial because it's coming, we have to think about towards the center. The skin is what to the skeleton? Superficial. And the abdominal pelvic cavity is inferior to the diaphragm. How does ATP hold energy? I was really happy with this. Most of y'all got the, it's holding it in its bonds, specifically covalent bonds. Okay, covalent bonds in this case. An organic molecule will definitely have the atom carbon. Carbon's the one that should go in the first one. But also have hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. Okay. Most of the time. What type of bond shares electrons? Covalent. Number 9, which of the 4 macromolecules does sucrose fall into? It's a carbohydrate, it's a sugar. The sugars and starches fall into carbohydrates. Explain one new thing that you learned so far in this course. I like to leave open some questions where I can see you, again, thinking. And this one doesn't have necessarily a right or wrong answer. And it's not supposed to be just a give me point either. Because I've had people who get this question and they'll leave it blank because they can't think of anything they learned, which is really sad because if you can't think of anything, I don't know what was going on the last few weeks. You know, that is not the case in this class. I'll tell you, nobody was like that here, but I've had other courses where the question was worth more than 1 point. We're talking like 5, 6, sometimes even more. And people will avoid it because it's a written question. Never avoid write. Write something. Not literally the word something though. Okay. I told the student once, never leave something blank. Okay. And so she started writing, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. Like, okay, that actually does do what I told you to do, but it doesn't really help you. And I'm not making that up. She totally did. Okay, explain the level of protein structures. The levels of protein structure, excuse me. So you've got the primary amino acid sequence, that's your primary structure. Secondary is your alpha helix and beta sheet held together by hydrogen bonds. And that's the idea of explaining, so you gotta say more than just list. Tertiary is when they all finish folding up into a globular or sometimes barrel-shaped form. And that can be a finished protein, rather small, but it can happen. Quaternary, the 4th level, is when you've got multiple tertiary levels coming together. So you get a multiple, what used to be different primary sequences, they fold up and then they all come together into one big thing, sometimes in 4 pieces, like hemoglobin. So that was what we've got. Do y'all have any questions for me on the quiz? If you missed something, do you kind of feel like why you missed it? You understand? So we are almost ready with our material for just one. So cells have the ability to metabolize. So let's think about what does that word mean? When you say something metabolizes, you metabolize. What does that mean? To get, I like that, to get energy out of it, it's a good way to do it, to transfer energy from something. So metabolizing can go that way, a breakdown to transfer energy out of, but you can, metabolism can also be the building up of things. There are two forms of metabolism. One is anabolism and one is catabolism. Okay, anabolism is the one where you build, catabolism is the one where you break down. I remember that because I think of cataclysm. I think of that as like cataclysm is going to explode, whatever the case may be. So that's how I think about it. It's going to come apart. Okay, cells have the ability to digest food. That's going to be connected to metabolism because you have to digest the food down to molecules that cells can work with. You have to dispose of waste because there's always mass that you don't use. Okay, so the same thing for our bodies. There is mass in our food that we don't use, so we're unable to break down. The cells have to be able to reproduce, and when after you reproduce, you have to be able to grow, move. Thank you. And you have to be able to respond to a stimulus. Okay. All of those things, of course, are going to help you stay alive. So a lot of what we've talked about just now is going to have to deal with the cell membrane, because the cell membrane is this aspect of what is inside the cell that's part of the cell and what is outside of the cell that's not part of the cell. So you have this barrier of inside outside. When you respond to a stimulus, it's going to be the cell membrane that has to recognize that there is a stimulus, right? What if you need to get food into the cell? Then it's got to cross that cell membrane. If you're going to go back real quick, I'm trying to think of all this. Some of your movement is going to involve that cell membrane. At least with some cells, it's going to have a flagellum in the case of human sperm. But also we have the cytoskeleton that can pull and move those cells as well. Okay, so a lot of what we're talking about here, this physiology, is going to have to deal with that membrane. So how do we get things across, or inside or outside? Everything, maybe I should say everything, most things at least, are in some form of solution. So like your Starbucks drink this morning is a solution of things. It's not just water. Even coffee is certain components dissolved in water, right? Sugar, milk also could be added to that, and those are more components dissolved. So when you dissolve something or floats around in it, it's in solution. The solvent is the dissolving medium, and for most of the body, it's going to be water. Okay, not 100% of the time. There are some things that are not water that can dissolve, but for us, mostly it's water. And then anything that's in smaller quantities that actually dissolves, this is going to be your solute. So your sugar, your minerals, your I was going to say fats, but that's not true. Fats won't dissolve, right? Okay, and that's one of the caveats to the solvent, that sometimes you have to have things that don't dissolve in water, like lipids that have to dissolve in fats. So your milk doesn't actually dissolve. Not all the components of the milk dissolve in that water, right? There are fats and things that will separate. And a lot of times you'll see them. They'll separate right to the top. Okay. Now, there is different places where fluids are going to be. There's intracellular fluid. So intra means what? Inside, okay? So you've got fluid inside your nucleus, the nucleoplasm. You have fluid inside of the outside the nucleus, but inside the cell still, that's going to be your cytosol, and it's going to be dissolving gases, nutrients, salts. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Okay. But there's also extracellular fluid, and I don't think we talk about that quite as much. A lot of times we focus on what's inside the cell, but there's actually a lot of stuff going on outside of the cell that's still in your body. Do you have space in between your cells? Yeah. Let me ask you seriously though, how often when you think about biology do you think about the space between things? I feel like it's less than what we talk about inside of something else. I feel like. And what's really fascinating to me, for me at least, is that this extracellular fluid, we call it interstitial fluid. And I probably use that term interstitial fluid from now on, most likely. And it's going to be this fluid outside, but there's a lot of stuff going on out there. A lot of times what happens between two cells has to go into that interstitial fluid and then into the next cell. It's going to cross that. So sometimes things will come out of your blood vessels across the blood vessel walls into the interstitial fluids. Your lymphatic system actually absorbs water from that interstitial fluid and gets rid of it if you have too much. Okay, a lot of the swelling that can take place from water is not in your cells, it's in and around your cells, and can stretch some of those connections between cells. So you get nutrients, hormones, neurotransmitters. A lot of those things are things that are transferred. Salts, even waste products, because cells, of course, get it out of themselves, and then it waits for some other aspect of the body to absorb and get rid of it from the body. So to move things in and out of the cell from that intracellular fluid to that interstitial fluid or vice versa, you've got to cross this plasma membrane, which is selectively permeable. Some things can pass through easily, some things cannot pass at all. You've got to get nutrients in, and you've got to keep certain things, undesirable substances, out. Pretty self-explanatory. Now, have y'all talked about passive and active processes before at some point? Okay. I feel like this is something we need to go over, because if we don't, this is just a reminder, even if you know it, because understanding transport becomes more important at times than you might imagine. You might think, I don't think about things on a cellular level, but this kind of transport does affect you in many ways. So passive transport is for substances to travel across the membrane without any input from the cell. Basically, there's no energy. No energy is needed for passive transport. So it doesn't cost your cell anything. Active transport, on the other hand, does require energy, usually in the form of ATP. And so, of course, one of these is more expensive than the other. One is free, one is not. I'm trying to think if there's good. This may not be the best example, but I feel like this kind of works. I feel like active transport, active processes will be something like you working at your job, and your bank account is your cell. And when you work, you have to put a lot of work to get that large payload, that paycheck direct deposited, right? We'll think about this as direct deposit. Now, did it take work for you to get that into your direct deposit, into your bank account? To get that money in? Yeah. Now, the money itself, yeah, the job went in there, but you had to work for that. It's not the best example. Yet, if you've got bills that are on auto pay, those come out a whole lot easier, right? And I feel like this is also going to work as an example, because let me ask you this. Got your bank account. I'm going to think this is probably true for most people. I'm going to say outside. Which probably has more money? Inside your bank account, or is there more money outside your bank account somewhere? Because this is going to include outside, it's going to include your job, right? Does your employer have more money than you? Yeah, I mean, if they didn't, then you shouldn't work for them probably. They should work for you. So if this is your employer, they're probably going to have more money. Okay. So I'm bringing this up because this is going to come back over here. In most cases with your cells, the stuff that your cells need, a lot of times the cell is lacking in a lot of things it needs. Where is, like glucose, for example, eventually you're going to use up all your money and you've got to work to get more in. Same thing with glucose, right? You'll use up all your glucose inside your cell and you're going to need to get more in. But usually there's more outside than inside, and we've got, it's not that big a deal. You work a little bit and it crosses the boundary. Okay. I don't know if this is the best example, but I think it might be helpful to think of it that way. Yes. So passive transport, I think, is more like your auto pay. So like you have all these bills, and of course they're a whole lot smaller. But it's set up on automatic to come out. Like there's really no issue for it to come out. Auto pay doesn't require you to do any work. You set it up once and it's just automatically paying things, coming out really easily. Direct to pay, on the other hand, yeah, it's going to go in easy, right? But what happens if you don't work? What happens if you don't work? Does your auto pay still continue to take out money?
It does.
It does. And you go into overdraft, and then that's when your cell starts to die.
Oh,
Kind of makes sense. It's still not the best example. There are definitely problems like it come out with this, but I think that that's kind of helpful. So you want to recap that? If you work, money should go in, even if it's direct deposit. Does it do any work to do the direct deposit? No. Okay. And so, but if you, but it still requires energy on your part to do the work to get that money. To get it in, not a big issue. So that's one of our little problems. Active transport should have problems getting it in. It requires energy. So this is not the best example. But that passive transport is really easy to see here. That's his auto pay. And as we were saying, if you don't work, does money go into your bank account? No. So it does require work to get money in there, right? If you don't work, does your auto pay still keep going? And eventually you run out of money, right? Like I totally like overdrafted the other day. It's not that I didn't have the money, I just didn't have it in that account. And I think I set it up to pull from a different account than I had meant it to. And so I get this email going, you have overextended your bank account. And I'm like, uh-oh. Try to get something shifted over there real quick so it doesn't give me an overdraft fee of some sort. But if you continue to have your auto pay taking out all this, what's going to happen to your bank account eventually? It's going to shrivel. It's going to eventually die and take you down with it. If you were going through, I'm not going to try to play, well, if we have time. Do y'all feel okay with transport? We're going to talk a little bit about it more, but there's actually, I left this in the PowerPoint so that you could, I think it will actually let you click on it and play. So when you're going to study, I'm going to leave it up for y'all, okay, to do. I'm not going to go through it here. Okay, so let's go into a little more detail. Passive processes, there are actually a few. One of them is diffusion. Y'all probably heard of diffusion multiple times. Molecules that move from high concentration to low concentration. Okay. And I think that diffusion is a really good example here of the autopay situation. Is there usually more money in your bank account than what the bill costs? If things are going the way they should, if your bank account is healthy, if your cell is healthy, okay, in this case, diffusion would make sense. Higher concentration of money to lower concentration of money. Okay, does that make sense? Is that helpful? Okay, I was like, I thought that was, oh, no, that wasn't what that was.
Yes.
So concentration of high to low. So particles always try to evenly spread themselves out. Y'all probably heard the example of someone were to spray perfume on one side of the room. Over here, you're going to smell it strongly. Over there, Ryan's probably not going to smell it. Eventually, what's going to happen? It's going to spread through the room, but it's going to be in a lot less concentration, right? It won't be as strong for you over there as it was for me. But over time, it's going to be pretty equal for us because it's going to decrease its smell, but it's going to spread out over a larger space. This is the idea of diffusing. Now, that's diffusing without a membrane. Diffusion across a membrane is going to require energy going high to low, but you're going to have to be able to cross that barrier. So this will require things that do not get stopped by the barrier. So the size of the molecule, even the temperature can affect how fast it crosses, or even if it does cross in terms of size. Usually small molecules. This is an example where someone has dropped some kind of dissolvable tab in water. Eventually, it will evenly dissolve throughout the whole thing. We do this all the time, right? We dissolve.
Like the same thing with essential oil.
Absolutely. Yeah. Closer to where it starts out, it's going to be stronger, but it's going to diffuse across the room as long as it's aerosolized, which is what we do. We put it in the water and then we basically evaporate the water. Oh. Kind of.
Yeah, very much it.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I think that's a pretty good example. I'm not going to try to come up with another one. I think so. I mean, even it's in the name, right? Diffuser. Okay, so molecules will move by diffusion if any of the following applies. If the molecules are small enough to pass through the membrane, usually through some pore. Okay, this is why we have the membrane. A lot of these things cannot pass through on their own. Why? Because lipid bilayer. That phospholipid bilayer, what's in the middle of your cell membrane? What's in that middle part of your cell membrane? Which is hydrophobic. So most things can't cross the middle of that barrier, right? That means most molecules that are small can just pass through some pore. So sometimes we have these tunnels. Oops. We have these tunnels that allow things through. So if you're small enough to fit through a tunnel, you can make it. high concentration outside to the low concentration inside, or vice versa, wherever the high the low is. Now, if you are a lipid can't talk, soluble molecule, do you need the pore? No, you can just pass right through the membrane. So a lot of those steroid hormones, they're cholesterol lipid based. They can just pass right through. And then molecules that are assisted by a membrane carrier sometimes. So there's one thing a little more complicated. Still high to low. Does it cost you any energy? Basically, no. Simple diffusion has no assisted help. It doesn't matter if you're lipid soluble or small enough to pass through the pore. You just go straight through it. So I feel like that's pretty simple. Picture. Osmosis is a type of simple diffusion that is specifically for water. Okay. So when you have a very highly polar water molecule, it really is not going to pass through the membrane itself. It's only going to pass through aquaporins. Okay. What do you think would happen if your aquaporin, which is made of protein, was denatured? You wouldn't be able to get water across because it wouldn't be the right shape, maybe let things fit possibly. And that happens in some cases. I see this happening. Plants have this situation from time to time if they end up in places where water is acidic. I know this is anatomy for people, but and a good example of this is when plants get flooded. The longer that the plant is there, the more acidic that water gets. If it's not freshly it's not refreshed, the more acidic that water gets, it can actually cause aquaporins to denature. And even though a plant is in water, it will run out of water. This is why plants can drown. Some plants. And you may have seen this, you water your plant too much, roots go away, it'll die. Possible to have too much water. Water moves down concentration gradients always from high to low. I feel like this one's always important to talk about because this is where dehydration comes in. Okay. Why don't you drink salt water if you're out in the middle of the ocean? It's water. Such a high concentration of salt is going to do what to your cells? It's going to pull the water out. Okay, it's going to cause the water in your cells to try to dissolve that salt. And so your cells will dehydrate. So it actually is not to your benefit to drink salt water in the ocean, no matter how thirsty you are. Just heads up on that. If you're ever about to drown, middle of the ocean, or like stuck on a boat. Oh, everything ends up in some kind of problem for this class, I know. I read about a guy who went overboard recently and had to like swim 5 hours and about gave up until, of all the things, a harbor seal kind of encouraged him along. Like, no joke. Like, just come up and like push him up sometimes. Like, just, I don't know what it was doing. I don't know if it was trying to save him or if he just thought it was another seal. I don't know what was going on. But the guy credits his ability to survive because the seal kind of kept him going. But yeah, he went overboard and he was not prepared for it. He did. Yeah. One of those situations where you know what to do and he wasn't dressed for it correctly, all this stuff. But he went overboard to catch up and he had to swim. I don't know if he was alone or not. So I'm not sure. He possibly went overboard. I didn't read it so closely that I remember the details of that because I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
He was some kind of deep sea diver. I don't know if it's for sea urchins or something like that. So, but crazy enough, he wasn't prepared. Like he didn't have a wetsuit on. All the stuff that he should have had being out there, he didn't have going on, even though he knew better.
Yeah.
So it's what happens when you don't do what you know you're supposed to do. It's like not putting your seatbelt on because you'll be fine. You never know when it's not going to be fine. So I don't know. He possibly was alone. I never read what happened to the. I never found out what happened to the seal either. He didn't explain what happened after that. Did you take it home? Like, did you feed it? Did you, what happened? I don't know. It felt that way in the article. Okay. So in his case, you know, he was stuck in salt water, and one of the major things he dealt with was dehydration. So it is possible for him to have lost some of his water through skin contact with the ocean, but we actually have a barrier to that on our skin. There's actually all kind of a waxy, oily coating that we have. You may notice it. The more you wash your hands, the more cracked they get, and it's because soap dissolves that. Okay, it's actually not good to wash. Taking a shower every day actually is not necessarily the best thing for your skin, like especially hot showers, because that kind of coating that protects you, that waterproofs you, is washed away, especially with hot water. Because hot water makes it dissolve, not dissolve, but more liquidy and easier to remove with soap. So in his case, he probably dissolved some, but probably also not drinking anything for 5 hours in the full sun. So dehydration was a big problem for him. He was losing water. So you'll hear the terms hypertonic and hypotonic. I'm not going to test you on these terms because I don't know how often you're going to use them, but I do think it's useful to understand the terms hyper and hypo. So I think you could describe this without using the terminology, and I'm fine with, as long as you understand it. But I think hyper is helpful to know. Hyper is when you have something that is kind of high. Like if someone says you're hyper, they mean you have a lot of energy, right? Hypo would be the opposite of that, kind of low. Okay, so a hypertonic solution has more solutes, things dissolved in it, and the cells will begin to shrink if you put it in that. So if I put your cells in a hypertonic solution of seawater, there's much more salt, many more salts, much more salt. I'm not sure what the terminology there is, but your cells are going to lose water because it's going to try to go across the barrier to balance out that hypertonic solution. But let's say you put your cells in hypotonic solution of pure water, like distilled water. Your cells will take on water. They're going to get bigger. They're going to be plump and sometimes burst if they take on too much water when you put it in pure water. So there are some issues. You probably don't want to drink a gallon of distilled water every day. Don't know that I would want to do that because your cells will probably try to take that on in a lot of cases. But I also wouldn't want to drink salt water either. One thing that people do is if they'll drink liquids that are balanced in their electrolytes, because electrolytes are solutes in those wet liquids. If you will drink in a balanced electrolyte drink, that's closer to what your cells should be. If any cells are having less water, then they'll take water from it. If not, then they won't. If it's balanced on both sides, then it will just pass through. That makes sense. So isotonic is when it's equal on both sides. Isn't that a really nice red blood cell over on the left? Same red blood cell in a hypertonic solution. That thing has shriveled kind of. And on the other side, it is gotten very plump. It is possible for your cells to burst. Okay, from taking on too much. It is possible. happy thoughts. It could kill you.
Wait, if you drink too much water, you said your cells can burst.
Some of them, yeah. Your cells will try to take them on. So there are people that you can overdrink water.
Yeah, I've heard that, like, there's like a term.
There is a term, I can't think of it myself. Like I hear this with people who are, now there's a number of reasons why this in body. It's not always due to just like pure water, but if you overdrink too much water, like football players do this sometimes, they'll get overheated. But that's also a slightly different, more problem. But you've got this heat situation in the body that will affect things differently. But if you, like some people do these like water challenges, well, what are you doing? You're flushing your body with water. And so a number of things can happen. If your cells have more solute in them than the water you're drinking, then your cells are going to take on all that extra water. Okay, now your body is going to try to remove that. Hello, kidneys. But then you can go into kidney failure because you can overwork them.
So when people say like drinking down the water thing, that's good, but it's like, is that too much or is it?
Trying to think.
Depends on-
You look at your body weight
Yeah.
to calculate how many liters is what I would do. That's definitely what I would do. So you want to calculate it. You know, I wouldn't want to give a baby a gallon versus
Okay.
someone who's 500 pounds. You know, there's a difference there. Strange difference, but you get what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
better to calculate for you. Just like you wouldn't want to make blanket statements for how much a medication should be. You look at body weight and a number of other factors. You have a question? You have a thought? Well, go ahead, just try it.
I just like, so, for example, say you have a person that's like really skinny, and they're taking like extremely high dose of medicine. Would that, depending on the medicine, would that cause them to sleep a lot, or like?
Cause them to sleep a lot? It would really depend on the medicine, I think. But if their doctor, assuming that their medication is prescribed by a doctor, you know, they always wait. It's one of the things they do when you go to the doctor.
That's part of the reason why I do it.
Probably. I mean, you can also detect things going on with the body. If you were way heavier than you were last time, then something's going wrong. But yeah, most people also stay within a certain weight range. A lot of times, not everybody, but assuming that person is continually that skinny, the doctor will know that and take it into account. And most adults probably are within a similar range where medicine will fit. So depending on the medication, they have an idea of body weight. But like with dogs, for example, they will weigh your dog, and a lot of medications will be based on size of the dog. Or I should say, weight of the dog. So, like big dogs will get a higher amount of pain medication versus this, or and in fact, that's one thing that they do really get careful with is how much pain medication, like morphine, they might give a person. A lot of that's based on, weight, because that gives an idea of like how much your body can process.
Right. It's like water. So like if
Yeah.
you drink more than what your body can hold, it goes into overdrive because you can't excrete. all of
It's got to get rid of it somehow, but it can't do it necessarily as fast as your body might need. Yeah. You've probably heard this phrase, everything in moderation. And I feel like that is true. To some degree, that's what we talk about when we talk about homeostasis. Moderation is really homeostasis for us. If you want to, like, when people say that, you can even translate it to your mind and go, oh, that makes so much more sense when I think about it as a homeostasis. I have to keep this balance, which is really just moderation. You don't want to have too much of something. You don't want to have too little. You want to have that Goldilocks moment right there in the middle. feel like I'm seeing light bulbs. Okay. I haven't really talked about facilitated diffusion, but it's 8:49, and if I talk, I'll go over. Let's stop there. And we'll try to get this on Monday. Let me see what slide we made it to. We have about, wait a minute, seriously? No, I think we've got 20 slides left. Yeah, we've got about 20, so Monday we should be good. Think about any questions, like over the weekend, start kind of reviewing and see if you have any questions that you want to ask, okay, for the test. If you want to go, is this really going to be on the test? There was a few things that we've mentioned, said, I'm going to look at it, but not on the test. Okay, so if you want to review some of those things, just start preparing so we can ask for it next week. Okay, have a good weekend. I will see you Monday. On Monday, we will hopefully be back in our regular lab, and we will do the DNA extraction.
See you Monday.
See you Monday.